are and always were an evil legion. You took the Emperor's mission and twisted it. Selfish. Monstrous. Tormentors of the weak. If Horus had not turned, I would have gladly hunted for your kind myself. I thank you from the bottom of my heart that you came to my sword and saved me the trouble of looking. Raldoron de Gendor Stravoic, The Siege of Terra. In this series of videos, we are talking about the moments captured in Warhammer, in all its various timelines and settings, that bring out the best in those settings. Some are vicious, too close to call fights. Others are one-sided affairs, or unlikely and unexpected outcomes. But they are moments captured in the stories, all the same, which highlight the grim, dark nature of the worlds of Warhammer. The Siege of Terra represents a conflict which was ideal for neither the attackers or the defenders. Those on the attack under Warmaster Horus knew they were in a race against time as to prevent a counterattack by reserves that would be arriving for the defenders from the eastern frontier of the Imperium. They also had, unfortunately, lost a significant contingent of forces in exiling the Word-Bearers. The latter would have been ideal shock troops and demon summoners, which could have easily twisted the forces of chaos into an advantage on the attack. With their absence, another force, made up of the remnants of another infamous legion, would find itself in the role of shock troops, in a desperate bid to improve the power and position of their new master. For the defenders, the Imperium, it was a story of desperation. Outnumbered and with few resources to hold back the tide of the attack, the defenders had to spend their lives wisely if they had any hope of holding out until the relief arrived. Until that relief could materialize, they could only rely on their raw courage and training to hold back the deluge of madness threatening to overwhelm them. Under the horrifying conditions of the Siege of Terra, many famous and infamous fights would emerge, with stories intertwining over the courses of many lifetimes. In this video, we are to talk about the duel at the top of the wall, a duel of vampires in many respects, one who might take on the form of an angel, and the other taking on the form of a devil. This is the story of how first Captain Raldoron of the Blood Angels would encounter and fight Captain and acting Supreme Commander of the Night Lords, Gendor Stravoic, the Painted Count. Born to a noble family on Nostromos, Gendor was born into a world of intrigue and competition. Despite the Night Hunter's rule, there were still positions for power and authority in his draconian society. These traits would flourish in Stravoic for the entirety of his life, and despite his entry into the Night Lords, they would fester in him. A man who would prefer to politic his way around problems rather than fight them or face them head on. He was more than willing to betray his brothers, and even wished to betray his Primarch in many senses. A selfish, petty man, Gendor Stravoic represented all that Kurz hated about his legion. Ironically, Gendor himself would also contribute significantly to the Night Haunter's disdain for his own legion as well, through his actions and schemes. Gendor is a prime example of a traitor. Not only was he a traitor to the Imperium, even before then he had betrayed the Night Lords themselves. Among the first to deliberately induct people into the Legion through manipulating the recruiting process via his noble family, Gendor would attempt to recruit Marines loyal to him rather than loyal to the Night Lords. Often these individuals would have heinous backgrounds as criminals, something his Primarch despised once he was made aware of it. This was done as well to deliberately undermine the authority of his Gene Father and secure his own position of increased power within the Legion. He also deliberately withheld information on the status of their home world towards his father, as well in order to further his own designs. Even before the shattering of the Night Lords during the Heresy, Scrivok always possessed a keen mind for self-interest, and worked to even undo much of Kurz's work. The shattering of the Night Lords became Gendor's time to grow his Cancer's influence in the Legion. He was by most accounts unpopular among his peers and to those who were not immediately loyal to him. He came under the command of Korkesh the Pale and participated in the Battle of Sotha. In the aftermath of the Night Lord's defeat, he would execute Korkesh, a man who had been born a criminal himself, but was far more loyal to the cause of the Night Haunter than Gendor could be. During the battle as well, Gendor made a pact with a demon before seeing it sealed into a sword. The sword was provided to one of his underlings, who became dominated by this blade. This act was the true push of the Painted Count's rise to power, taking advantage of the groundwork he had laid, and was the start of his ultimate undoing. Jailed on board the Nightfall after the Battle of Sotha, he found that the sword which he had cursed his underling with now stalked him. He could not find a way to rid himself of it, and would later come to enter a new pact with it, taking the blade for himself in order to escape his imprisonment. His principal rival had become the man who had imprisoned him within the labyrinth itself, Lord Commander Shang of the Night Lords. Shang had been one of Kurz's few confidants, his equerry, and a Marine who the Primarch actually liked. He had also been loyal to the Primarch no matter the task, and would do all he could to work towards his master's plans. He wanted to reunite the Night Lords with their missing Gene Father, and deviate the Night Lords towards this goal. Gendor, much like Korkesh prior, wanted to find Horus. After escaping his incarceration, Scrivok would engage in a duel with his jailer. This battle would be over shortly, as Scrivok, despite being a middling warrior, now possessed the power of the blade. The demon within the blade would guide his blows as he put the better man to a miserable death.
I slew Lord Shang,
Scrivok croaked, his body failing as he looked towards the monster which had abandoned him in his moment of need against Raldoron.
I slew Lord Shang, not you.
The demon of the blade whispered and reminded him. With most of the remaining higher-ranking Night Lords dead or missing above him, and having proven himself the superior to the former Lord Commander, Gendor Scrivok received the power and recognition he had always craved. Long had he plotted and schemed to achieve greater and greater power and authority in the Legion. Long had he accelerated its decline in favor of his own position of power. Long had he undermined his Gene Father and even doomed his own world and birth family as a result, all for his own power and gain. He would drive the largest contingent of Night Lords remaining, reuniting most of the Shattered Legion in the push towards Terra. Now, Gendor Scrivok declared himself the Lord Commander of the Night Lords, recognized as the acting leader first by the remaining Night Lords, and then by Horus Lupercal, the War Master himself. As a commander, Gendor had become promoted beyond his capabilities. Though not completely incapable as a commander, often displaying the same cunning he did in his politics as he did in his command, he had no deep insight as a commander, and often viewed the lives of his subordinates with contempt, and had little to no room for anything approaching dissension towards him. His arrival at this new height of political and military authority came only through decades of lying, murder, and politicking, though Gendor viewed himself in a very different light, as a noble commander who rose to the top exclusively on merit. Of course, the merits he rose to this position on, though useful at the time, did not always translate well into victories. The Night Lords long ago had ceased to be the legion of Conrad Curze in most respects, and, with the stamp of authority by Horus, the Painted Count had become the true master and father of the legion. It was more a recognition of reality than anything else. And it would be under Lord Commander Gendor Strivok that the Night Lords would test themselves against their enemy, and against the walls of Terra itself. The Painted Count would vow to Horus, looking to gain more power and prestige for himself, that he would take the walls of the palace. Trusted from an early time, Raldoron would be a rock his Primarch and chapter could rely on. Raldoron would have come from the Ball system, the home system of his Primarch, and from his first appearance had the demeanor of a loyal soldier. He was an equerry to his Primarch as well, and accompanied him on a multitude of important conferences and battles. From the Council of Nicaea to almost any campaign, Raldoron stood for his beliefs and stood by his Primarch. An incredibly important note, however, was Raldoron was renowned in several key ways which allowed him to rise to prominence. Not merely because of the trust of his Primarch, but his abilities. These fell broadly into three categories. The first was Raldoron was considered to be a flexible commander, and not rigid in his thinking. He would, of course, always lend towards completing his duties and acquiring or achieving any objectives set out before him, but he would be able to adjust and adapt to changing situations quickly, which would improve the combat performance of his forces significantly. Raldoron was highly respected for this attribute, and it was surely a skill which he honed into place, elevating him above his peers through his performance, though this is not the only thing which made him a great commander. Second, and almost as important, and something lost on many commanders inside both the Horus Heresy as well as the world of Warhammer 40,000, is that Raldoron had the ability to understand and empathize with his troops. He understands their struggles, but also understands their capabilities as a result. And this, combined with his other talent for command, makes him an incredibly challenging commander for anyone to face. He knows when his troops may break. He knows when they are spent, and he knows when he can push them forward to victory. If all of this wasn't enough, Raldoron is also listed consistently as one of the greatest swordsmen and warriors of the Imperium itself, giving him the ability to command from the front, from honing his body even as a space marine to an extreme extent. Often, he is placed in the same league as warriors such as Sigismund and, ironically, Sevatar. His history of engagements is impressive, as Raldoron would face down some of the most extreme conditions of the wars during the Heresy. He would see himself commanding in horrifying scenarios as the Blood Angels fought demons from within and without. He would face down adversaries from other legions such as word-bearers like Harox, and be forced to face off against superior entities such as Kabanda. As a tactician and strategist, he would be left to try to resolve the failing Imperial war effort, helping Sanguinius wherever possible and helping the Imperial cause. Through these contributions, the Imperium would inflict more damage on their adversaries at Betagamon, as well as shielding their own forces from increased casualties. These efforts, despite his talents, and the talents of his Primarch, as well as others, would do little to change the outcome, however. He also acted in a commanding role beneath Sanguinius during the harrowing of Pyrrha and Davin, as well as the assumed additional contributions across the Ruinstorm.
Was it politics, my lord, that brought about this ruination? I thought it was treachery.
Raldoron discussing the decaying situation on Betagamon with Sanguinius. Raldoron's story is not only of command and virtue, however. His nature and loyalty to the Imperium could obscure his vision, such as recommending the destruction of the Interrex, and playing a small role in their annihilation through his reports. In addition, Raldoron would lie and conceal the truth of one of his famed brothers, Azkaellon, who was responsible for slaughtering their allies, the Space Wolves, during the confrontation with the Ragefire engine and Kabanda. He did this out of loyalty to the Imperium and his Primarch. However, when needed to achieve a greater goal, Raldoron would not be beyond lying, even if uncomfortably, to superiors and his Genefather. With the Blood Angels breaking through the Ruinstorm, participating in the Battle of Betagamon, and now cemented on Terra, Raldoron would be given the vital command of being responsible for the Helios Gate, a major part of the fortifications of the Imperial Palace. It would be here that Raldoron, left to hold a static fortification with the Blood Angels working in tandem with the Imperial Fists, would come to face his opposite. Wars such as the Battle for Terra are not things which can be easily understood by the human mind. The Imperial Palace is no temple to mankind, but a fortification that exists as a bastion against any force that could be arrayed. The walls themselves are analogous to mountains of ferrocrete and adamantium, more than an imposing monolith of horror to attack than a true defense. The soldiers guarding it are amongst the most disciplined in the Imperium. Honed by years of warfare, brutal battles, and remorseless violence, the defenders of the wall knew there would be no quarter given to them, and to fail at the walls of Terra would be to fail the Imperium and the Emperor in their entirety. Equally horrifying were those in the attack. Monstrous forces of demonic entities hell-bent on causing horrifying destruction and misery, as well as battle-hardened warriors in their own respect from the traitor legions, preparing for an assault that would see them break through to their key objectives, that being the destruction of the Emperor of mankind, and likely much of mankind as a whole in an orgy of self-destructive violence. In the midst of this fray and nightmare, the Night Lords would be unleashed by their master, the Painted Count. This significant contingent of forces would attempt to take the wall by raptor assault, led by one Lucorphorius, a notorious figure who would later become a member of the Black Legion before changing his allegiance back to the Night Lords' warbands prior to the 13th Black Crusade. Reinforcements would arrive on the wall as the Night Lords took to landing on it, pushing towards their objective to overwhelm the defenders with an excessive display of brutality and violence. The defenders, bolstered by the competent commands and capabilities of Raldoron, as well as Maximus Thane of the Imperial Fists, would hold fast in the face of these assaults. Astartes died. Night Lords, Imperial Fists, and Blood Angels, it didn't matter which. There was a truth, however, which was that the Night Lords were incredible when momentum was on their side, but had no stomach for a fight they could not win. Whether knowingly or unknowingly, this drew the Painted Count and his blade to seek out Raldoron, who rallies his men and cuts through Night Lords as they come within his blade's reach.
Blood Angel, face me!
His eyes caught a glimpse of the pauldron on the Blood Angel's side. A nameplate, one of glory and prestige, caught his attention.
Raldoron! The Raldoron!
He made a few passes of his sword, reveling in its lightness and its killing edge.
This will be a day to celebrate. The day I slew the hero of the Blood Angels. I am Gendor Stravoyek, the Painted Count, Lord Commander of the Night Lords Legion, and I am your end.
Never heard of you. The two figures clashed, Raldoron striking first as the two weapons met, one an extension of the man holding it, the other weapon being the true warrior which the Blood Angel would face. Their strikes would lash back and forth, though the demon's edge grew faster with every strike, parrying and striking with a frequency and efficiency which Raldoron could not hope to match despite his incredible skill and strength. It appeared as though he would be bested by the demonic entity and its corporeal symbiote. At the moment of the Count's triumph, where Raldoron seemed to have an opening which could be his for the taking, where the final blow may be delivered, where he would shatter the moral of the defenders and gain glory and the prestige and the validation he sought. He failed. Gendor's blow was blocked as his own speed seemed to grind to a halt while his opponent recovered. The blade, which had in truth been the true engineer of the final components to his rise to prominence, had left him. It left him at the height of his false grandeur and vain glory.
No! It cannot be!
That always was the problem with your legion, Night Lord. You are quick with your torturers' knives, but few of you are worthy warriors. His speed and insight reduced to their natural abilities, Gendor would continue the battle. Strikes were unleashed upon him as Gendor managed to hold his defense, blocking the strikes with increased desperation, and even launching riposte to try and regain his advantage, or even to gain breathing room to recover or give flight. But with every blow delivered by Raldoron, his position became far clearer. He was losing, and being backed further and further into a corner. The Blood Angel gained ground with every blow blocked or counterattack delivered. Finally, as Raldoron's blade carved a piece of his ceramite armor away, Gendor's realization of defeat and fear overcame him.
Atramentar!
Stravoyek called, his panic rising to the fore.
To me, Night Lords! Help me!
Listen to you, the masters of fear. You are cowards, like all cruel men. Raldoron's next attack would finally do away with the last semblance of Gendor's defense. Perhaps if Stravoyek had spent time understanding the legion he'd helped build, had he not been lazy and indolent, he would have understood his troops and his position better. The Night Lords were not a force capable of taking the wall, as they were fighting an entrenched foe who did not fear them, and would not relent. In such a contest, they would have never succeeded so long as someone such as Raldoron remained at the head of the defense. Any hope of killing him and breaking the defenders vanished as well when the demon gave flight from Gendor's side. Gendor had overestimated himself and his abilities, for he'd never spent the time and effort necessary to become the true master of the blade. He relied on natural talent and half-hearted training, and though he may have been superior to some of the Blood Angels he'd faced, he was never capable of handling the task of killing Raldoron on his own. In contrast, Raldoron had spent his life crafting himself into a weapon, not crafting himself into a politician and thug. What stood before the Night Lord was who he should have aspired to be: strong, loyal, disciplined, and filled with the courage to face down any foe. Raldoron did not remake the Blood Angels in his image beneath his Primarch's nose, undermining him. The only thing they shared is that they'd both lied to their Primarch. But even there they were opposite. Where Gendor lied to Kurz for his own gain, Raldoron lied to his Primarch to save him from a truth that could have damaged him in the Imperium itself. With his defense broken, Gendor would feel his chest armor be cut through by Raldoron's next strike, sparks scattering across his vision before the power in his armor was cut cleanly by the Blood Angel's attack. Any attempt by Gendor to save himself now were feeble, as he was battered and broken by Raldoron, who beat him and cut through him with his own blade. Raldoron was his sword, and the irony was the inversion was still true for Gendor, and his sword was no longer wielding him. It was here that Raldoron delivered the truth to him, and received only a beggar's reply in response.
Wait! I give you my surrender! You beat me! I am your prisoner!
There can be no prisoners in a war as this. How much mercy have you shown to all those you've harmed? I have as much mercy for you as you had for them. Now get off my wall! Gendor would face the end of his life as he knew it in the moments that followed, as he would be cast down from the walls of Terra and sent to the ruin below. For Raldoron, defeating the Painted Count was another task to do, another duty to enact, though this had been one he enjoyed. His disdain for the Night Lords was more than warranted in his eyes. Holding the gate against the Night Lords not only granted him victory in the short term, it expended a vital force for the traitors and deprived them of their commander, and fractured any future attack made by the traitors in Midnight Clad. Raldoron would still have trials yet in the Siege of Terra, but would surpass them. He would continue his story and would be the only man even remotely capable of standing in the space which Sanguinius would leave behind. Raldoron would become the first chapter master of the Blood Angels. Ironically, though he would do all that he could to honor his Primarch, the Blood Angels chapter would be built by the man most loyal to him, and would be built as a chapter in his image. Without truly knowing his adversary on Terra, he would defy him in spirit by his every action after their battle. For Gendor, the battle was over. His broken body would approach death before the demon who abandoned him would give him one more chance to save himself. Its true desire was not the destruction of the Imperium, but the union between itself and the creature that was Gendor Stravoyak, the Painted Count. They would merge into one being to save Gendor's life, before he would be drawn into the warp to achieve his apotheosis. Gendor Stravoyak was killed by Raldoron, but the Painted Count would be reborn, and would be seen once again. No longer the Lord Commander, but the Lord of the Warp. He would remain as cruel and vile as he had been in life, and his return would be to visit suffering and death upon the Imperium again in his new, sickening demonic form. Raldoron would be remembered as a warrior who ascended to the heavens with his father's wings, while the Painted Count descended into the 6th layer of hell, remembered by few and loved by no one. Thank you for joining me here today as we look into the fascinating confrontation between the two enemies at the Wall of Terra. If you enjoyed this content, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. We produce content as much as we can, and we do live streams on this channel every single day where we discuss lore, miniatures, releases, and just about anything Warhammer related. I'd also like to see your thoughts on the Painted Count and Raldoron, as well as their confrontation, below, so feel free to leave a comment in the comment section. Thank you for your support, and I do hope to see you all in the future.